Cool. Hey everyone. So we're gonna start Breakout in a minute. I just want to ensure that the sound is going through for Calgary. So if you could just throw me like a thumbs up or something as soon as I'm streaming through. Oh, we got some stuff from Braden. Awesome. Whew. Okay, so we are about to hop into Breakout for week 2, day 2, aka the only breakout or lecture that Nima has slides for. This is the one where I get to cosplay as. You haven't had Carl Jensen as a lecturer yet, right? Okay, so there's a lecturer called Carl. Carl is awesome. If Carl ever watches this video, hi Carl. So Carl has slides for all of their lectures, and the first time I started, like when I started working at Lighthouse, I watched a bunch of Carl's stuff, and I'm like, I will do slides as well. Oh my God, slides take a lot of work. That's whew. So so we have one set of slides. Yeah, slide. You got some stuff. So today's stuff is ES6. I wanna just start this off by saying that the way I'm framing this breakout isn't necessarily a tutorial on how to do particular things in ES6, whatever ES6 is. I'm kind of motivating the idea behind the fact that languages evolve over time, right? So we're going to see that ES6 is one of the newest versions of JavaScript. So as far as topics, we'll start off by talking about what ES6 is. We'll look at some history of the JavaScript ecosystem, and then we'll look at the new features that have been included in JavaScript in recent years. So ES6, it's in the game. No, so ES6, aka ES 2015. ES stands for ECMAScript. ES, ECMAScript, aka the brand name of JavaScript. So JavaScript has this secret like alter ego as ECMAScript. ECMA stands for the European Consumer Manufacturers Association. That sounds, what's that? I totally meant, wait, did I say consumer or computer? Consumer? Consumers. European Computer Manufacturers Association. Yeah, I guess it would make sense if there was manufacturers of consumers. They're the ones who made you. So no, the Computer Manufacturers Association, basically, it's just a big group of nerds off somewhere in the Swiss Alps or something. You know, like anybody here play Skyrim before? So you know, like the Greybeards, right? This is the Greybeards. They just kind of sit up at the top of their mountain, and then they're like new JavaScript features, right? Like that's essentially what's going on. So they basically come up with the standard for the language. They don't actually make the language, right? They don't actually make the program that runs JavaScript. They come up with the standard for JavaScript. So they'll say, yes, the ECMAScript, you should be able to do this. I don't know how it's going to work, but you should be able to do that, right? Let there be var. Like, that's what they say. But they don't, like, define how var is built up, right? Or how JavaScript works at the microscopic level. So every time they release a new standard for a language, it's called ES something. ES5 was in 2009, and ES6 was in 2015. And that's a big jump in time. Big jump in time. So ES6 was a huge, huge new release. People are very excited for it. Now, the question that I think kind of pops into... Is that somebody's... Oh, okay. The question that like pops up in my head when I see like ES some number is like, why do we need new versions of this language? Right? Why do we need new standards? And I've broken it down to... Whoa. Sorry about that. So I've broken it down to... Just make sure that's fixed in. That was not supposed to happen. Okay, I've broken it down to two main things. Two main reasons for there being new standards for a language. First one is we find better ways of expressing ourselves, over time. We find just new ways of saying things. So, once upon a time, I might have been like, yo, word up, right? And now I might not say that very often anymore. Or people might be like, okay, it was cool to say like dab on the haters, and now that's not cool anymore. Like that's not cool. We found better ways of expressing ourselves, right? I think yeet is a new thing. I don't know how. I actually still don't know how to use that. Kelly, can you shine any light on it? What does yeet mean? Yeah, nobody does. I've seen it used in like company emails. Yeah, it was like yeet out your garbage. I don't know what that means. So yeah, so there's new ways of like expressing yourself, right? In the same way that we express ourselves in like English, right? And there's like slang on top of that. That stuff carries over into like code. So we find new ways of expressing ourselves, and on top of that, the problems that we face change over time, right? The web was a different place back in 2009. 2015, completely different place, different problems. We need new constructs in a language to express solutions for those problems. So enter kind of the history of JavaScript so we can see a little bit of what's happened there. JavaScript is an implementation of the ECMAScript standard, right? So ECMA, these nerds get together and they say this is the standard for this language, right? And then somebody has to build it, and the implementation of that thing is called JavaScript. So JavaScript as a language is influenced by Scheme, Python, Perl. What does that mean? It means it's a language that hasn't just popped out of nowhere, right? It's a language with like a rich family history. And if sometimes you come up with questions like, why does JavaScript do this? It might be worth looking at where JavaScript comes from. Maybe some of the things that you really like about JavaScript have been inherited from somewhere else. JavaScript was made by a person named Brendan, not Brandon, but Brendan Eich, in 10 days. So if it feels like JavaScript was kind of slapped together, it's because it was. It was like a 10-day project for the Netscape Navigator browser in 1995. So the idea was you have a browser, and a browser is for showing HTML pages with CSS on it. And the people making the browser were like, hey, it would be cool if we had some interaction on this web page. Let's embed a programming language into the browser to run arbitrary code. And Brendan Eich goes, yeah, sure, I'll do that, and makes JavaScript. Right? Little did they know this kind of ballooned way out of what they thought it would be. Now, I really want to point out there's a big distinction to make between JavaScript and Java. Can anybody tell me what the difference is between JavaScript and Java? Has anybody heard of Java before? Cool. Awesome. Are they in any way kind of remotely related? Right. So I'm seeing this head nod, right? Yeah. No, they're not related at all. They're completely different things. Very different, unrelated. Java is to JavaScript as ham is to hamster, right? Completely unrelated things, right? The only reason that JavaScript is named JavaScript is because Java was very popular around the same time that JavaScript was made. So, Brendan Eich and team are like, oh, you know what? You know how we could capitalize on the fact that Java is really popular? Just pick a name that's very similar, right? JavaScript. We're in, right? That's just marketing. But it's a completely different language, right? Unrelated. Okay. So, I had earlier just kind of used the word ecosystem. And I want to talk about what I mean by that. So, JavaScript is a language, and we can use it to do languagey things. Quick, like what can you use English for? Is English good for anything in particular? Can you sing in English? You can rap in English? Can you talk to your parents in English? You can't? Okay, sorry. Can you talk if you that was a bad one. Yeah. Actually, like my parents speak Italian and Farsi, but they speak English as well. Can you talk to people here in English? Right. I'm just trying to show that English it's a very cross kind of whatever skill, right? You can use it to communicate with stuff. JavaScript, same thing. You can use it to communicate with anything that understands JavaScript. It just so happens that there's some really key kind of players in your life as a dev that can speak JavaScript, right? Two main ones for us. Two main ones. The first one, the big one, is the client side, right? Browsers all speak JavaScript. So if we want to communicate with a browser, right, through the page, right, we can use JavaScript, and we're just lucky. That's awesome, right? All browsers, they all know JavaScript. In order to speak a language, we need to have an engine to interpret the text of that language, right? So you have a brain that can understand English, right, or any other languages you know. Browsers need to have a brain that understands JavaScript. And now Chrome has a brain called V8, or I'll call it the engine. It's called V8. Firefox has an engine called SpiderMonkey, right? And these engines are just small programs that are part of a bigger program that can understand JavaScript code. V8, SpiderMonkey, they're two different programs. But they both behave the same way when they're given JavaScript code to run. Right? It's like how, you and I and all of us are all different people, but we all behave similarly when we hear English. Our brains are different, but we behave similarly. Another place where we find JavaScript being used is on the server side. And this is something that you've been exploring like last week and early this week, is using Node.js. Right? Node.js is a program on your computer that lets you interpret JavaScript. And just for some neat facts, Node is built on top of the V8 engine, same as Chrome. So we have this JavaScript ecosystem. The reason I'm pointing out things like V8 and SpiderMonkey is not that you need to remember these things or actually learn them. It's the fact that a language is a standard, right? And then it's up to specific people to develop programs that can actually understand that language. And we can't always assume that all of the people making these programs have made them all the same, right? So I used to have slides for cool questions, but so there might be things in V8 that we can do that we can't do in SpiderMonkey, right? Very minor things. That's why we run into things like, Chrome and Internet Explorer act differently, right? Do you ever hear like developers talk about how working with Internet Explorer is the worst, right? It comes down to this stuff, right? That the engine they're using underneath is slightly different. So we're going to completely skip this slide and go straight into talking about some of the new features from ES6. Actually, want to take a second. Are there any questions at the moment? Cool. And are there any questions from Calgary? Characters, that's the... Oh, Thomas gave me a definition for some of the slang that I don't understand. Dictionary.com. Thank you, Taylor. Okay, so there are many new features that were introduced in ES6, right? Way too many for me to go over in 1 hour, but there's a couple that I think are particularly important to mention. I've kind of highlighted them here, but we're going to dive through them bit by bit, starting with a thing called for of. So we have learned about looping through things at this point with for loops. right, with for loop. So if I hop into my browser, not this one. Okay, so if I hop into my browser, I'm going to be using the console built into the browser to demonstrate, whoa, stop it, to demonstrate some of the things that we can do. So at this point, we may have seen the console before. Is anybody confused about where I am right now? If you are confused, can you speak now? Perfect. Okay, so I am working in a place where I can write some JavaScript stuff and have things happen. If I have an array, so you got Tim, I'm going to throw Sally in there. Bradlina is my new favorite name. So we have Tim, Sally, and Bradlina. And I want to console log each of these names. Knowing the JavaScript that you know now, you would be able to go var let I equals, let var I equals 0. I is less than, names dot length. I plus plus. I'd be able to loop over this and console.log names I like this. Then I get Tim, Sally, and Bradlina. I'm about to show you that you have a whole new for loop structure where instead of going for var I is less than whatever, I'll be able to go for, let's go var something of names. And I want to console.log what something is. Now you have most likely just never seen this kind of structure before. A for of. Maybe you have. It's completely legal, right? For of is a thing that you're allowed to do now in JavaScript with ES6. You couldn't do it before. And what it does is it will loop over each one of the entries in an array in this case. I gave it an array, and it looped over every single one of the entries. Super useful because I don't need to do all my crazy index stuff anymore. Right? I get this stuff wrong every time. This, a little harder to get wrong. Right? For var something of names. I might, when I write this out, go for var name of names. I like going var singular of plural. Right? That's just a nice way to kind of write it out. Right? Not mind-blowing. It's just cool. New feature in JavaScript. You can now do this. Right? The graybeards have been like, hey, you know what? People are looping over a lot of arrays and making a lot of index issues, index problems. Like, let's come up with a new way of expressing ourselves for that. Right? Very similarly, there is a for in. What does the for in give me? It gives me the index, right? It's giving me the index of that particular thing, right? In this case here, with my array, I mean, not particularly useful other than the fact that I didn't have to do, var I equals 0, I is less than array.length. It's just always going to go right through. Now, let me just hop back into, where did I put that thing? Boop, and boop. No. Sorry, I lost my slides. There we go. Okay, so this is for of and for in, where the for of iterates over all the items, for in iterates over all the, in my slides I wrote keys, and the reason for that is, if I have an object, we're going to go dog. Var dog, name, Otis, breed, Frenchie mix, and we had personality was feisty this morning. Feisty. Here is my dog. I can do this. For var, thing in dog. console.log thing. Wham! I've looped over all of the keys in that object. Right? New thing you can do in JavaScript with ES6. You can loop over all the keys in an object using a for in. Right? Can you think of places where this might be useful? Can you think of places where this might have been useful before? Yeah, I'm seeing a little bit of a, like, Nima, why didn't we have this lecture earlier? So, for var thing in dog, I will often call this for var, keys. Sorry, not keys. Key, right? Something like that. You're going to be using a for in somewhere soon. So, again, JavaScript, new features, sometimes just adding in new stuff to do. I just want to show that you can't do a for of with an object. That'll give you an error. Yes?
So when you do that, does it automatically assign
Right, yeah. So when you do this, it will automatically assign in here key to each one of the keys. Right? So each one of the keys. If I wanted to grab the particular value, I could go, dog key. Does that clear that up a little bit?
so you can use that to later on in the function?
Oh yeah, you can keep using the key inside of here, right? So instead of just console logging it, I might do other stuff with it as well, right? So here I'm console logging, and then I'm console logging dog key, right? To exactly, dog being the object that I was looking at. So this is just one of the things that has been added in ES6. It's not a thing that you need to use, right? When a language gets stuff added to it, it's not like you have to change the way you do stuff. Many times it's just additional, right? So anything that you can do with for of, you could do with other things, right? But for of might make it simpler. Yes?
Can you use the same method for each?
Ooh, so you're talking about like this for each? So for each is not a for loop construct. This is like within an array. Like arrays have a for each method, but this isn't a thing that's built into. You mean like could you like something like that, or is that? So for each is something different. If I have an array, I can go array dot for each. And then to this, I have to pass a callback. Right. So this is a bit of a different situation here. Right. We might want to talk about that afterwards, just because it's just different than ES6 stuff. We're gonna look at let, const, and var. So you've been using var at this point, and do you know anything about let and const at this point? Has anybody read into it? Seeing a little bit of nods, right? Soon you're about to like completely give up on var. Right? var is the thing of the past for a particular reason. Do you remember the conversation that we had about scope last week? Right? It was actually a week ago, right? Looking at scope, I did a whole thing with like a call stack and all that. Do you remember that? Yeah, I'd use the whiteboard. So var and let and const are different ways of declaring little bits of memory, little variables, right? The thing about var that's really weird, and I'm going to show you in a sec, is that var does a thing called hoisting. It does a thing called hoisting, which feels a little bit counterintuitive to the way that you write code. Let and const are additions to ES6, which give us new ways of creating variables that don't have hoisting. So what hoisting is going to mean is anytime that I write something like var hello equals world, JavaScript's going to interpret this in two parts. Without asking me, it's going to split this up like that. So it will do the variable declaration first, and then it will do the variable assignment without asking me. Not only does it do that, but it cuts this variable declaration, and it will move it way up to the top of the scope, right? Often the top of the file if you're in global scope. It can be a little difficult to see what this means without a proper demo. So let me do this. I'm using these curly braces. I'm using these curly braces to create my own scope. This isn't an object. In here I'm doing a for loop. And this for loop is saying for var I equals 0. I is less than, let's do 10. I plus plus. And I go console.log I. It shouldn't be too much surprise that I'm able to console log all the numbers from 0 all the way out through 9. This is weird. I has escaped. I has escaped the little bit of scope over here. Like, what? I put you in a little bound. How did you get out? I have no idea. Right? So var is a little sneaky. It sneaks out. Let me do something else here. I have no I variable at the moment because I refreshed my page. So when I go I get an uncaught reference error. If I try to console.log I get an uncaught reference error. It says I don't know what I is. But if I go console.log I over here, still uncaught reference error. That's fine. What if I do var I equals 12? What happens now? I got undefined. Because what happened was var I, just this part that I highlighted, that gets hoisted up to the top of the scope. I12 is underneath the console, so it console logs I being undefined. That's totally fine, right? And then I get I equals 12 underneath. So if I look at I now it's 12, right? I hate this. I hate this so much. It's built into the language. It's legal, right? But it's so confusing for people. It's so confusing, right? So instead we get new things to work with, such as let. If I go let I equal 12, and before it I go console.log I, what do you think happens? Uncaught reference error, because of course it would be an uncaught reference error, because I haven't, declared I yet, right? This feels like a natural way of, doing stuff. I could move this around now if I wanted to. I get 12, and lo and behold, I, outside of this scope, also still, not defined. I does not escape that scope there, okay? Good. It's behaving the way I would expect a good variable to behave, right? So from now on, you'll be using let. You'll be using let, and you will be using a thing called const. What do you think const is short for? Constant. This is short for constant. And I'll say in here that, let me just open up the slides real quick. So let lets us create block scope variables that aren't affected by hoisting. Const lets us do something similar, but there's one big distinction, which is the fact that const is a read-only reference to a variable. Meaning, we set a const once, and we can't reassign it. Right? We can't reassign it. And I want to really point on that word reassignment. I'm not saying I can't change the value. I'm saying I can't point it to somewhere else. So the value itself is not going to be immutable, just the reference. And I know that feels maybe theoretical. We're going to see it as an actual thing right now. I'm gonna write const. Let's see. I'll say const pizza. Pizza is a constant in my life, right? Pizza is always there for me. I'm sorry. Pizza. No. So pizza is always there, and I'm gonna say const pizza is cheese. If for some reason I decide to change pizza to I don't know, anchovies, uncaught type error. You can't assign to a constant variable after it's been assigned, right? There's like a lock on it. Like I've locked in pizza. Yeah, it's like calling dibs. Like this is it. Now, there's a reason for why this could be useful for us. We might want to declare some things in one part of a program that should not be changed by other parts of the program, right? Usually that's where bugs pop up, right? When one part of a program accidentally changes something that should have stayed fixed. And those kinds of bugs are really hard to nail down, right? And go like, where's that coming from? So we use a const for it. Notice if I try to go const pizza equals cheese again, it tells me you can't. Pizza's already been declared. So the way that you should from now on approach your programs is making everything a const unless you need to change its value. Then you'll make it a let. Right? By default, make things const. Otherwise, make them let. Yes?
Now you said consts are not immutable. So they still can be altered. They just
Exactly. So for Calgary, the question was, I said the const is not immutable, meaning that they can be altered but not reassigned. And exactly. Here, I'm going to start off by not having any pizzas. Right? So pizzas is not defined. And I'm going to go const pizzas equals, and then I'm going to go cheese, anchovies. What else are we ordering? Anybody want food? What's that? Hawaiian. All right. Hawaiian. Anything else? A little bit of bell peppers. Nah, I don't know. So we got pizzas. Here's pizzas. It's this array. If I try and do something like pizzas 3 is the potato pizza. Can I do that? Snap, I could. I didn't know I could do that. Aw, man, my whole thing falls down. Let's do this. What if I go pizzas equals a whole different list of things? Ramen pizza. I don't know. I haven't had pizza in a while. If I try to reassign pizzas, right, it won't work. But there are ways for me to modify inside of pizzas, right? So I'll be able to modify it by going pizzas and then something to it. Like pizzas 3 is that thing. Or pizzas dot pop. So arrays have a pop method. Right? Arrays have a push method. I'll just put another cheese on here. Arrays themselves have methods that you can use to modify the arrays, right? We just won't be able to take the const and point it to something else. Right? Does that make sense? You can use this for all kinds of things, like say I made a const, again, I'm just going to go dog, const dog, name, dog, breed, big dog. I have some object that is a const, so if I try to reassign dog to the number 123 or something, that's not going to work. But if I say that dog.age is 123, that's completely fine. Can I assign a value that's inside of an array? Absolutely. So I have my pizzas, and if I go pizzas, 1 is tomato. That's fine. I just can't reassign the entire const. Right? I can mess around with parts of it. If this feels confusing for you, that's totally fine. It's just going to take a little while. I just want to make sure that, Connor, I totally agree. So nobody can add pineapples. Connor says we should declare all pizzas to be constant, so nobody can add pineapple. I go through phases of liking pineapple in pizza and disliking it, and I think this week I don't like it. So that's const. I'm going to show you a couple smaller features here that are less big than the whole let and const, but they're useful in fun ways. So I really like these backticks. I don't know if you've ever used a backtick before. They remind me of, like, I don't know if anybody's into like anime or manga, but like you see a lot of these in like I don't know, they're like cute. These are like cute ticks. You can now make strings with backticks instead of using the single quotes or the double quotes. You can do that. So if I used to be able to console.log hello, now I can console.log backticks hello. And it almost looks like a hello with sass. Like hello, right? Like, but it's got a little bit more going on than that. This kind of string now is called a template literal, or a template string. You heard the word template today when we were talking about EJS templates. This is kind of similar, because what I'm able to do is make something that looks like this. Hello, my name is name. And this is useful if I have a variable. Like, let's let go name equals Bruce Wayne. And I go, hello, my name is name. What I end up getting is, hello, my name is Bruce Wayne. Right? Cool. I mean, you're already able to do that with the double quotes. You would go, hello, my name is, and then you'd have to have a space, and then a plus, and then name. Absolute same thing. But I mean, look how cute this is. It's got a little backticks, right? No, it's interpolated all in one place. We don't need to bring in all the pluses, right? We get to see it all in one nice kind of line. Cool. That's all I want to say about that. You can play around with string interpolation. I guess I did use my Bruce Wayne example here. All right. Okay. This here, I'm going to feel a little bit bad about the way I'm going to show this to you. This is going to be both a very small addition to the language and a very big addition to the language. And you kind of see what I mean over the course of a couple weeks. So there's a new way of making functions in JavaScript. And these are called arrow functions. So you have already made a ton of functions by going function hello, and then console.log hello, I am a function. You've already done this. Right? And now I can call the hello function. You've also started to become comfortable with the fact that I can make anonymous functions. Right? Anonymous functions are a thing you've seen, and I can save an anonymous function in a variable. I could do something like that. Does this freak anybody out? No? Awesome. New function. Right? You've used this stuff for like callbacks. Right? You've had some, what did we do today? We did app.get of / and then you put in a function in there like that. So you've seen this. Now, ES6 gives us a new way of making functions, and that's called an arrow function, and it looks like this. Where I'll be defining the input and then the output. So here is a function that, given nothing, returns the word hello. I would have written this as this. Ignore the error, but like these two things here, functionally the same. It's just this is shorter syntax. I've got this thing called a fat arrow, right? I also think this looks really cute. Personally, it's just like pointing, like, oh, this is what you get. It's very explicit that way to me. I can have this be used in a couple places. I'm going to save it in I'm going to save it in a place. Let's go new function. Let new function equal that. Now I can go new function, and that returns hello. I might do something like have a function that receives a name, and maybe it'll return hello to that name. Right? New function 2. I can never, Jane, there we go. Right? I just want to let this sink in for a minute. Is it sinking? Not much new going on here. If I want to list out more things in here, comma H. Right? Then I can do more stuff. Now, notice that I haven't written the word return, because by default, an arrow function takes one input, or sorry, a series of inputs over here on the left side, and this is the return value by default. If I wanted to have a function that has multiple lines of execution and then a return statement, I can still do that by doing this. I could go return hello name, you are age years old. Right? And this is a case where like I just didn't have something else to put on another line, but maybe you have a function that needs to do many things. I can still use my return statement. I just need to remember to wrap this thing with curly braces. Yes.
So if you're not using curly braces and it's only like a single line,
Mm-hmm.
the return you don't need to remove multi-line. Like if it's going to be
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So if it's going to be multi-line and you have these curly braces, you need the word return. If it's single line, you don't have the curly braces and you don't need the word return. Perfect. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, that's going to depend on like the style guide that you look at. My personal way of doing things is like I'll generally put curly braces and have a return statement because I never know if I might need to add more lines later. So I might as well just write it like this. And then if I'm going through and I want to make my code look like nice and polished, maybe I'll get rid of it. But it comes down to the style guide that you're following. Yeah. So like, but functionality wise, like if I don't have the curly braces and I'm doing it on one line, then I don't put the word return. Now, there is one kind of weird thing about arrow functions, and I'm going to mention it, and you're going to forget about it until like week 6. So, have you talked about this? Have you heard of this yet, right? So you've talked about this. Do you like working with this? Yeah, I'm seeing that's a wide smile. Yeah, you might really like this. The rest of you, like me, I don't like this at all. I try to stay away from it. But you can't. It's going to be a big part of your life. Now, this in JavaScript is a bit larger of a concept than what I can cover right now. But the thing about arrow functions is that arrow functions don't rebind this, right? The way I'm going to say that is sometimes you're going to write things as function literals and they'll work, and then you write them as arrow functions and they don't work. Or the opposite, right? It might be the opposite. Is that a question?
So when you're writing an arrow function, you can have as much arrow function as you would usually write return. Like, if you were to put a condition in there,
Mm-hmm.
you can still use arrow function in the condition, right?
I mean, I guess it's. So the question is, can you still use arrow functions inside of conditionals and things like that? Yeah, you can use arrow functions anywhere where you would use regular functions. Right? It's the same thing, except for one small difference, which is if I. So I have a big file that I'm going to give you in the notes, which is every single one of these examples with me writing notes next to it. So here's my pizza. Here's Bruce Wayne, and then down here is a thing where I say, okay, here's the say hello function as an arrow function, and then here is a variable called weather set to rainy, and then I have an object. And the object itself has a weather and a get property, where I've set get to be this arrow function that returns whatever this dot weather is. Where are you seeing a semicolon? Oh, the colon here? I mean, this is an object, right? So I'm making an object that has two keys, weather and get. Weather is set to sunny, get is set to this arrow function that returns whatever this dot weather is. And then I have a second one here which is almost exactly the same, except get is set to a function literal that returns this dot weather. And I want you to, like take some time to play around with the example that I give you. But we're going to see that when I do this, and just get rid of all the comments. When I do this, and I call weather object dot get, I end up getting rainy. So I end up getting rainy. If I was to do this again though and go weather2, and make this a function, literal, like this. When I go weather object 2.get, oh whoops, I forgot to rename this thing to weather 2. That actually messes up my whole thing. Oof. When I go weather object 2.get, it gets me sunny. So, I mean, really, all I want you to get from this right now is some things are going to act differently with arrow functions as opposed to function literals, right? It's okay if that doesn't make any sense to you, as long as you can tie that knowledge to the word this. So, I'm going to put this in the notes. I'm going to say if your thing acts weird and you have the word this in your code function, right? Look at learning about arrow function this stuff. Right? This is literally just a note to yourself. You're going to learn this eventually, right? I just want you to have a heads up about that. It's only, yeah, so arrow functions, the only difference for them is the way they handle this, right? Are we okay with just knowing that and moving on? Is that alright? Calgary has a question. Can you use callbacks with arrow functions? Absolutely, and that is the perfect place to do something like that. So if I have an array and I want to sort it, I could absolutely write an arrow function in here to sort it and say given A and B. So this is very similar to what you had for last week. Return A minus B to sort. Okay. But what I'm seeing here is that my return is very simple, so I might as well write it as given A and B, there you go. And I've just written it in one line here as opposed to breaking it up over multiple. Again, not a thing that you need to do. Not a thing that you need to do, but it's going to be useful.
That won't seem if you were to use let in your first example.
This one here?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I use let, things get a little bit weird.
So there's a reason why you use var.
There is a reason I used var, and it's just to make this example work. If I wanted to have a better example, like an example that used let work instead with this, I would just need to dive into some stuff that isn't for this breakout, right? But I will put more reading into that in the notes, and I invite you to explore that.
So there is going to be a situation where we have to use var.
No. This is me contriving like an example to work for you, right? Like me jerry-rigging something. I'm just trying to show you that sometimes when you use function literals and the word this, things act weird. Right? That's all I'm trying to show you. Don't worry about fully understanding it yet, because I promise you won't need this for like another week or two. Right? So don't worry about that for this week. However, I do at this point suggest that from now on, look for ways to write arrow functions in your callbacks instead of writing function literals. Right? Just look for ways. So when you're doing your express stuff, use arrow functions in your literals, in your callbacks there. Yeah. So, I don't know who. Alex. Yeah, what you've written in the Slack, that would totally work. For Vancouver, there is an example of using a callback and a set timeout, similar to my sort. So the rest of this is not necessarily like important in terms of how ES6 works, but I do want to wrap it up by showing you two things. One of them is called the spread syntax, and the other one's called destructuring of objects. So what destructuring is going to let us do, and this is again just built into ES6 now, is that if I have an object that has an A property and a B property, I don't have a variable called A. Oops. I don't have a variable called A. Can I just ask, sorry, we're in the middle of breakout, but we'll be done in a minute. Yeah. I can pull the A out of that object by pointing it there like that. And if I go A now, A is set to that. Weird. But really it's just shorthand for going let A equal object.A. Alright? So this is something you could choose to explore, something that's just been added to ES6. I've put more examples in the notes. The other thing that you might want to take a look at is destructuring objects. Sorry, not destructuring, but spreading objects. And what spreading is going to mean is if I have an array, and I want to use this array in a different array, I can do that. Dot, dot, dot. And I always think of it as just like taking my butter knife and just spreading that array out into that new array. Right? Little dot, 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 just spread. Right? You can see the dot, dot, dot in a couple different places. Right? I really invite you to take a look at the documentation. Yes? Yeah, you can do that with objects. And that's actually really cool because if I have an object, let's do object 1 equals A1, B2, and we're going to say C is 3. If I want to make object 2 also have all the things from object 1, I can go obj1 like that and then do D4. And now when I check into object 2, it's got everything from object 1, everything from object 1 over here plus D4.
But object 1 still only has 3.
Yeah, object 1 still only has 3. That one hasn't been changed. Yeah, it's spreading out that object into the new object that I'm making. Right? Spread syntax. Yes. Calgary has a question. Thank you. Senpai. If you declare a global var with let, can you use it inside a function? Yeah. I mean, if I'm over here and I go let name equals Bruce Wayne, and I make a function, say thing, and inside of here I go console.log name is like that. I can go say name, and that's say thing. That's what it was called. Say thing. I can go say thing, and it will still see Bruce Wayne, even though it's declared as a let. Like that's not a problem. Same with the const. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Cool. We're gonna wrap it up. 4:04. We started at 3:05. So about an hour. There are some other things in here that are kind of neat to look at. But basically, in the notes, I'm going to give you a link to a page called ES6features.org, where they've listed out all of the new features in ES6. And it's honestly pretty cool. Whoa. ES6features.org. They've made a little table of everything on the left. I've covered some of them. And you go to like, oh, how do constants work up here at the top, and they'll give you some examples of how you can do stuff in ES6 and how you might have done it in ES5. Or like I just did destructuring objects or stuff like that, string interpolation. Right? Right, so similar to what I've done. And then they'll show you examples of how you might have done it before. Cool. That's ES6. Enjoy. Takeaways are use let and const. That's it. And arrow functions. Thanks everyone. Notes will be out in a minute. And